So my name is Will Navoyi, and the photo that I've chosen is of me with my dad, and I was probably about 2.5. The photo is special to me because it sums up a time when me and my dad had a really good relationship and was in a place that he cared very much about and I've come to care very much about. So it seems like the most relevant photo that I could think of that would suit my concept of what your project is. And so it sprung to mind immediately. There wasn't any question in my head when I saw your project. That photo came into my head. This is outside Malmesbury Abbey, and Malmesbury is a special place to our family because my dad was born there and never left, and I was born there and I moved away, and since my daughter's been born, me and my family have moved back to Malmesbury because I had an idyllic childhood and I would like my daughter to have an idyllic childhood. It holds more significance than I think I'd realised before, and coming back to a place that has such a strong community where my dad was a massive part of that community, it holds a particular significance that I hadn't appreciated. Yeah, so my dad was so passionate about the place he was born that he researched the history of it and he wrote a book about the history of it. He would get very angry about things not being the way they should, and that's probably the way he thought they should, which isn't always the right thing, but that's the way that he thought. And if he thought something was wrong, he would go out of his way to try and fix that. But instead of being obstructive, he knew how the system worked, and so he became a councillor, was on a lot of committees. He was mayor twice. He was an active member of the community when they bulldozed the hospital. He made sure that he got publicity around the fact that that was an asset to the community that's been removed, and he campaigned a lot to make sure that something was put there in his place. And I think that, to me, in terms of any legacy above him being a character and him being sort of really well known in the town and him writing a book and him producing loads of paintings and everybody having a story about him, to me the legacy is the fact that we still have a health centre here, because if it wasn't for him and the people that he'd got around him, it wouldn't have happened. It was an absolutely normal day. Like, mine and my dad's relationship was at a good point, and we used to speak to each other like once a week, twice a week. We didn't see each other as much as we should, but he was in Malmesbury and I was in London, and I was busy and he said he was busy, and so we talk on the phone quite a bit. And one day I gave him a call because I wanted to chat to him, and he was driving, so he said he'd call me back. And he'd gone out to do some painting with a friend, and he said he'd call me back afterwards. So I was just getting on with the rest of my day, and the phone call didn't come, and then I got a phone call off his number, and on the end of the phone was somebody that was just absolutely hysterical, like somebody that was just completely losing the plot, like somebody that was in shock, somebody that couldn't really breathe very well, couldn't talk, and they just kept saying, he's dead. And I knew it wasn't my dad because it wasn't his voice, but I needed to know what was going on. So I asked the person on the phone to pass me on to someone else, and they passed me on to a paramedic who said, "Are you the next of kin?" And I didn't really know what to think then, so I kind of asked what the situation was, and they said that they'd been called out to a man who collapsed, and when they got there that he died. and that's how I found out about it, which was, well, horrific, to be honest. It wasn't, I mean, there's no good way of finding out, but yeah, that just, because of, but I think the way that I had someone that was hysterical and then someone that was just like coldly factual, my brain didn't know how to process what was happening, and I don't think it would have been able to process the situation anyway, but I had no idea what to do, so I just stood there for don't know how long, just thinking about, was that real? Like, was I awake? Was this actually a real thing? Was this someone taking the piss out of me? Was this some sick joke that somebody was making on me? And then once I'd processed that, I realised the enormity of that situation, and so phoned my brother and literally said, "Dad's died, I don't know what to say," and just hung up. And then I spoke to Mum and told her to pull over in the car, and she told me that was stupid, and I said that she had to pull over, and then I told her, and she just said no in a way that, well, basically broke my heart completely. Something that's like a tattoo, like that will stay with me forever. The way that she said that will always stay with me, because even though they'd got divorced 5 years before, it's the father of her children. They still loved each other, definitely, they just couldn't be together. So yeah, it was just all horrible. I don't think that there's a good way of finding out, and I think that the reason why this project is so important, and wasn't talking about me, why I find it so important, is that it gives people an understanding of what it's like, and that there isn't a way of doing it, and that there isn't some form of hierarchy. Because earlier on, when you were talking about your dad, that broke me. Like, that's even, like, to me, that's even worse. So it's odd that you've said that it seems worse this way around, because actually to me it seems worse seeing someone's demise. Like, the way I look at it is, my dad was with his best mate at a beauty spot and had a massive coronary, so he probably didn't even feel anything anyway. And if you gotta go anyway at all, then that's pretty good, actually. I mean, the rest of it, the fallout, the impact it has on everybody is shit, but for him personally, no one needed to worry about, he didn't need to see this effect that he was having on other people, because that's one thing I think must be awful for people, is to feel a burden on their family and to see that they potentially are being a burden on their family. And so I think that it's very difficult to try and compare the severity of something when there isn't a hierarchy, and there isn't one thing's worse than the other. I just don't think that you can ever prepare yourself for it. He had to have an autopsy, and so after the autopsy, that's when they laid out the body, and that's when I went, that's when I realised that it wasn't a sick joke, and that's when the grieving started, was when I actually came to terms with it. I mean, if you look at the grief curve, it's a thing, like, it really is. It's funny how you can actually draw it out. So I was in absolute denial until I saw a body, like, completely. I was going through the motions, because, like, all of the things that happen when someone dies happened to me. Like, I'm getting all these phone calls from people, like, from the hospitals, like, you have to give consent for this, from the police being like, we need to move the car, from like the funeral director being like, we need to make arrangements. And so the motions are happening for me to understand that my dad's died, but it wasn't until I saw him laid out that I had any understanding that he'd died. The thing that really got me out of it was my friend Ollie, who was like, can you help me out with something? And I was like, what, basically? And he was like, I've got this art installation at the Big Chill Festival. Do you want to come to the Big Chill Festival and work? And I was like, yeah. So it was Ollie that got me out of that, because he treated me completely normally, and that was the bit that got me. It was just like, someone was like, come on mate, let's do this, it'll be fun, I need help, can you help me, it'll be fun. And that's what started actually getting me back to normal, was realising that it was me being the idiot, not everyone else. And so actually that people were nice, but it was just the fact that he wasn't all like, oh, they're there. He was just like, come on, let's do it, let's have fun. And that got me back on track to say, okay. And it was that whole thing about people don't know what to say, and it's almost like, don't say anything, actually. Or because there's nothing you can say. I don't have any advice to people at all about what to say. I think all you can say to people is, I'm here, I'm ready. It's that whole thing, I don't think there's a right way. There's no advice I can give to anybody for it. I would like our society to change a little bit in terms of how we view death, because as much as we can say, it's funerals are a celebration of life, like a lot of them aren't, and a lot of them are really kind of somber affairs. And I just think if we were to talk about it more, and and it wasn't such a taboo subject, we talk about other things that are really personal to us. People talk to me about their medical conditions all the time, and it's like, you're happy to talk to me about your, whatever might be wrong with you, your feet rotting off because of your diabetes, but you're not going to talk to me about dying. And it's just, I just kind of wish that people would talk about it more. So I think it's going to happen. You may as well have a plan to share with your family about, what you'd like, because then you don't have to second guess. Because that's tough in itself, is not knowing and then thinking, oh my God, did I make the right decision? And then never knowing if you made the right decision.